Let's go high octave. That's a rad sound here in the room. I'm going to break down that sound for you, but let's go ahead and talk about like, subscribe, leave a comment. What I do here on this channel, if you haven't watched before, I make music and I make rad sounds like that. And there's no secrets. I want to show you how to get cool sounds or get you thinking about sounds differently. That's what I'm all about, man. So check it out. We're going to talk about how to get that sound in this video. It's just a couple little things put together to make a rad sound. And that's what my passion is here in the studio. You may be saying to yourself right about now, what was that kick-ass tone in the intro to the video? Well, I'm about to tell you right now. What's great about that tone is it's built from 3 parts, and those parts can be interchangeable and still give you a tone that is similar to that, just little specific pieces change. So it's got modulation. It's actually got 2 kinds of modulation, but really only one modulation pedal that you would think of as a modulation pedal. It's got octave, both octave up and octave down. We're doing that in another pedal that is really cool for this kind of thing. It's got mix knobs built into it, so you can blend in that clean signal, which is what I was doing, and we'll get to that. And then the last piece of the puzzle is fuzz, and that's what I want to touch on first, because I've been seeing a lot of podcasts and guitar shows on YouTube that lately that claim fuzz is best into an overdriven amp or into an overdrive pedal and then into a clean amp. And I find that it's not bad that way, but I really feel like the tone you were hearing there, first of all, is into my 67 Twin, Drip Edge Twin, vintage amp. And then I also over here have a dual rectifier Tremoverb, which can go from as clean as the Twin all the way to extremely distorted. Most people think of rectifiers as metal amps, but I find that they do everything pretty well. And I've played fuzz into that on every setting, every level of gain. And I really tend to prefer the fuzz into the Twin, mainly because when I play it that way, it feels very much like classic guitar tones that I've heard before. Like if I plug in my Mark I Tone Bender clone into that Twin and play the riff from Gene Genie by David Bowie, Mark Ronson, great classic riff, it sounds exactly like it. Another classic Ronson riff, Rebel Rebel. If I put my Analog Man Sunface into that Twin and roll down the volume on my guitar, it gets me very much into that area of Rebel Rebel. It's real raunchy. I don't know what he used on that, but it feels similar, almost like a clean rolled down fuzz face or a treble booster maybe into a clean amp. And I feel like so many tones were just fuzz straight into the amp because that's what they had back then on those classic records. So what I was using for this, I started out with the Big Muff. I just got a Big Muff and I've been experimenting with it and it was great. But then I switched. I kept the same things going on the other parts of the tone, but I switched the fuzz to my Boss FZ1W. I have several fuzzes here, and the Boss is a great one, and I really like the Boss going into that Twin with these other aspects, the octave and the modulation. Real quickly, I want to punch in here. I almost forgot to do this. I want to walk you guys through the signal chain for the guitar. It's very minimal processing, but there are some things you need to do to get your tracks sounding right for YouTube. And I want to talk about some of the things that I've learned that took me a while to learn, years, to get my music sounding the way I want, to create my template. And I use a different template for YouTube than I do for my music. It's a very minimalistic template for YouTube, but there are some things you need to think about if you're a YouTuber, and I want to go over those a little bit, maybe help you guys out if you're thinking about getting into YouTube. So for the guitar track, that's this yellow track here. The main thing I'm using is a little bit of saturation. I just got this Waves little tube saturator, and it sounds good on the track. So what a saturator does is keep your level, your actual volume, low, but gives you a boost because it's adding those harmonics in. And you'll find that when you're bumping level way up to get your sound where it needs to be, it causes a lot more problems and can be a lot more harsh, especially coming through YouTube compression, than if you just use a saturator. I've also recently started running 2 channel strips a lot of times, just doing minimal EQ things on each channel strip instead of doing big EQ moves on one. So I'm boosting a little bit on a Neve channel strip here, and then I'm using a Helios where I'm cutting 700. And I mean, it's very small EQ moves, like a 2 dB cut at 700 and a 2 dB boost at 3.2 on the Neve. And then if we go down here to the master track, I've got some tape saturation going on, and I always use a bus compressor, either an SSL bus compressor, or I like the Shadow Hills as well. The Shadow Hills is like 2 compressors in one. It gives you a little more versatility, but the SSL bus compressor is great too. It's the sound of rock and roll records. And then I really like this limiter. A limiter is another way you get your level up to where you want. Going into my master track, the levels are just hitting around -10, anywhere from -10 to -6 at most. And then I've got the limiter set here for -2, but the actual master track, the 2 bus, is only hitting about 4 dB, but we're getting a little more clipping here. I find around -6 to -4, I like to go a little bit hotter around -4 on my tracks for YouTube, because usually the YouTube thing is just a dialogue and maybe a single guitar track if you're doing a demo like this of a tone or a pedal or something. So you don't have as many instruments going on to thicken up the track like you would in a song. I go higher on my limiter when I'm recording music for streaming. But doing it this way, layering on things, just using a little bit to get your track level where you want, and then using that limiter at the end. I use very little bus compression. I'm only compressing about 2 or 3 dB on the SSL, but it gives it that glue. Even in something like this with the dialogue, you want your dialogue to come through. I see a lot of YouTube videos that sound too quiet to me, and getting the limiting going on and the bus compression is going to get your dialogue in a nice place, or your vocal for a song as well. So I just wanted to run through a few of these things that I was doing. The only effect going on that guitar track is a little bit of reverb with this Valhalla Supermassive on an aux send, and we're sending out -2.5 dB to the reverb. That's just to give us a little stereo width, but that sound in the room is what you're hearing in this demo, and it's really impressive in the room coming out of the amplifier. Let's talk about where we're getting those octaves, and I'm getting those from the Bigsby Pedal. So with the Bigsby Pedal, you can go up or down by half steps all the way to the upper or lower octave. And this is really cool, especially if you're using it with a latching pedal like I was here. I just got a cheap latching pedal. I'll show you. I have a cheap one from Amazon that I'm using with the Bigsby Pedal. I have a little bit nicer one with my Drybell Vibe machine. They both do the same thing, and they'll latch down so you don't have to hold the pedal down if you're playing like in baritone, using it for baritone sounds, you can keep the pedal dry and have straight baritone. You can go down an octave and keep it dry and have a bass type of sound. You can, mimic bass. You can go up and get like high string parts, kind of Nashville tune parts. I actually use a Nashville tune guitar here, but it'll do a similar thing. It'll give you those higher, lower octaves or half steps. So if you have a song in your set and you want to just go to E flat from E, you can just roll it down a half step on here, kick on that latching pedal, and it'll give you that. A lot of things on the Bigsby pedal you can blend in. There's a modulation on here, and I also was blending in for like the octave fuzz sound. I was blending in the dry signal, but you can blend in your dry signal for the modulation and get that detune. On here on the pedal, it's called detune, and I find it does give you something similar to like a micro pitch sound, which micro pitch traditionally, I use it a lot on vocals here. Use a Sound Toys plugin for it, but it was found first in the harmonizers from Eventide. It just pitches down one side of a stereo image and pitches up the other side to give you a different type of modulation that's different than chorus but quite similar. So using that with the chorus that I use that we're going to talk about here in a minute, it just gave me a little bit different modulation and really added to the nastiness with the fuzz and the octaves. There's endless possibilities with this Bigsby pedal. I find myself trying to play pedal still licks with it. I do lots of things with it. When I first was getting my studio together, I was using it for bass sounds before I got my bass. I had a lot of instruments here that I've had for a long time, but I was in need of a bass, and it filled that need for a little while till I got my bass. And the last piece of the puzzle is modulation. And for this, I started out using my Univibe. I was thinking Univibe and fuzz is always a cool sound, from Hendrix to Robin Trower. Very cool sound, putting Univibe and fuzz together. And it sounded great. And then I put on my Boss CE2W, and I liked it even better. On that CE1 setting, it gives you almost a Leslie type effect, depending on how you roll in the rate and the depth. And that's where I usually like it most of the time. It's got a little more wobble, but it really sounds thick and lush, and that's what I was using on this. But like I said at the beginning of the video, you can try different modulations in there. You can try different fuzzes and get different octave fuzz sounds. There's been a lot of octave fuzz videos on YouTube lately, and this is how I go about octave fuzz. It's really gnarly. It sounds great. I like to experiment and try and get unique sounds in my studio, especially through the amplifiers. I also use some amps in a box and some plugins to get my amplification sounds at times, but 90% of the time in my music, I'm going through the amps, because when the sound is coming through microphones, it just gives you something more that you don't find in those digital simulations. There's something about that air from the speaker hitting the mic that just feels right in the mix. And maybe you can't tell, but I can tell, and it's definitely a thing. And even more than that, when you're playing in the room with the amplifiers, it makes playing easier. You react to that sound you're getting off the walls and from the speakers, and the feedback and everything coming together in that soup of analog tubes and strings and the mic preamps, everything hitting together really makes tone fun. And if you get your tone right, creating songs is a lot easier. You don't have to struggle nearly as much once you have the tone. So we'll be back with another one, some more tone tips, some more music, some more studio stuff. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. See you next time.